Goji berries also can actually reprogram stem cells, and goji berries, it's amazing. It's one of those continuum. Like you hear these days, you hear a lot about these medicinal foods that have been used in Asia for years, like cordyceps mushrooms, which I saw in the marketplace the other day. It's really cool. But goji berries are something very common as an herbal medicine, and I think that one of the things that we need to remember is that when we're borrowing and exploring fascinating food substances that have been used traditionally for thousands of years as medicine in other cultures, we should be just a little cautious that this doesn't mean that we can just be playing around with the substance. But goji berries, which I love to put goji berries in tea. If you mix it goji berries with tea, put a date, a dried date in there, put some chrysanthemum flower in there, you kind of create this really nice herbal tea. You can put oolong tea or black tea, so you can actually find ways to extract some of these natural substances. Goji berries have bioactives like lutein and zeaxanthin, which is good for your vision. But some of these substances also reprogram your fat stem cells as well.
Amazing, amazing. In Chinese medicine, it's one of the definitely top 5 things, but traditionally it's not like we might do today, which is snacking on goji berries. It's used in teas and being able to infuse different things together. For years I would take, maybe I'm doing a cordyceps tea, right, or reishi, and doing a decoction or kind of boiling it down, adding some goji berries in there. Also, they add like a nice flavor note too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As well. And goji berries are so interesting because they're one of the few plant foods in general, but in particular in the berry family, that's essentially a complete protein. You're going to find all the amino acids there. It's like that is so incredibly rare, not to mention all those other micronutrients you just mentioned.
And that's what I'm saying is that instead of just buying a big bag, a sack of it, and snacking on it all day long, there's great wisdom in looking back at how traditionally they actually used it, whether they cooked it in a soup. You can put it in a beverage, you can put it in a tea, you can also cook it in a soup, and it also lends this really sophisticated, interesting flavor to chicken soup, for example, or vegetable soup. So the best thing about ingredients these days, Sean, is that, I write in my new book about 150 ingredients that are shown with human research studies, along with their doses of foods that can activate your metabolism, burn down harmful body fat, and generally activate your health defenses as well. For people who may encounter a food that I talk about that they're not really sure what to do with, the wonderful thing today is that you can go onto the internet, you can search that food on Google, put recipe, okay, and put video. Click on the video and you're going to have the search results. You'll have somebody passionate who's experienced teach you how to actually cook with it, and you'll have multiple choices of multiple videos to see. There's no more secrets on how to actually use these things, but try to go with sort of like learn something about how it was done for hundreds of years.
Yeah. I love this. This is a way we can consciously choose our bias, okay? Because a lot of our biases obviously are unconscious, but I'm encouraging people, and as are you, to create a cognitive bias on what have humans been doing the longest, right? What have our ancestors been doing to get us to this place where we are such an evolved species and are the most complex, amazing brains and all these things? Because what we're doing today, with according to the BMJ, about 60% of the average American's diet is ultra processed foods now. Children, it's even higher than that. And we're making our brain cells literally out of this garbage, so getting a bias to where, number one, what have our ancestors done the longest? But the other thing is, how did they use these foods as well? So I love that. Let's talk about another one of these 5 defense systems that you cover in the book. And again, pick up the book like ASAP, because he breaks down and ties in these 5 defense systems in metabolism like none other. Another one of these is the DNA protection system. Why is this important in the context of metabolism?
All right. Remember I told you that when you start growing excess body fat, one of the things that really is harmful, in addition to inflammation, is that expanding harmful mass and I want to explain where that harmful mass is most harmful, is inside your body cavities. It's not under your arms, under your chin. It's not the muffin top, all right? Not in your thigh and your butt, all right? It's actually packed inside your body. So you could look kind of skinny, or you could have a large body, but equally, the visceral fat, which is viscera, I mean gut. The gut fat is the really billowing, harmful, inflammatory, damaging fat. It's correlated with terrible diseases, terrible chronic diseases. So what happens is, as that grows and gets bigger and bigger, think of it like a baseball glove wrapped around your organs, just choking your organs, getting more inflammatory, right? Remember that gasoline pooling around your feet when you overfill the tank? Now you're talking about inflammatory fat wrapped around your organs. You don't want that to be going on, all right? So the thing that happens is that all these, that billowing fat produces a lot of free radicals, all right? And that is an pro-oxidative stress on your organs, and they're like completely surrounded, choked off by this expanding fat. So the good news is our DNA, which is present in every single cell in our body, in every organ, actually is capable of countering that damage to an extent. All right, and this is why ultimately what we need to do is control extra body fat to protect ourselves. But we have our own three musketeers with their rapiers and their swords, kind of defending against it, and that's like natural antioxidative protection, DNA repair mechanisms. All right, to try to fix DNA that's actually broken. By the way, we know that excess obesity, excess body fat, high BMI, all linked to the development of cancer, right? We know that cancer is caused by DNA mutations. This is the connection, all right? And we know that our body tries to protect ourselves as much as possible. It's a health defense. But at some point, it gets overwhelmed, right? Like your defenders actually are surrounded by overwhelming forces. And that's actually when you tip over into the state of complete from health to chronic disease. This is why we all have an opportunity at any given point in our life to be able to combat that extra fat, which, by the way, back to the metabolism, there's a lot of misunderstanding about metabolism because we often are told or even think about that we're born with either a slow metabolism or a fast metabolism, and that's our fate. But in fact, it's not quite so. It's and that our slow metabolism dooms us to actually struggle with weight our whole lives. But in fact, it's that extra body fat slows down our metabolism. It's completely the other way around. So by fighting extra body fat, allowing your body to do what it wants to do while you're not eating, and by eating foods that will naturally burn down that extra fuel and shrink those extra fat cells, what we're doing is unleashing our own operating system. The metabolism wants to actually be active in our body, and that's a good thing because it puts the power in our hands.
Yeah. It's amazing how often, in particular in your new book, but just in general in our reality, how obesity and or excessive fat gain is connected to cancer, and how the solutions or dramatically reducing the risk of all of these things all tie together, and they're all found in a variety of foods and lifestyle practices. Now, in the book, this is a direct quote from this particular section. You said that excess body fat creates free radicals inside your body and increases the risk for cancer-causing mutations, unquote. And you also share some of the foods that can help to boost DNA repair and protect us against excessive fat gain and excessive potential with cancer.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the foods that are associated with high antioxidative properties, right? These are phytochemicals, these are flavonols, polyphenols, all actually are able to assist us. I mean, we talked about some of them already. Green tea, actually wonderful antioxidant properties, but it's really, think about it less as what you see on the label of somebody trying to sell you some, healthy, specifically healthy tea. But think about it as really just sort of boosting your natural health defenses, helping your DNA protect itself. Tomatoes, watermelon, they've got lycopene. They also are wonderful. How lycopene is so powerful that if you actually have a cup of tomato juice or have 2 slices of watermelon before you go out to the beach, like a couple of hours before. So have lunch, make sure you have some tomato juice or watermelon, a couple of slices of watermelon, average slices of watermelon. Before you go out to the beach, it'll actually protect your body from ultraviolet radiation damage from the sun that you're going to get on the beach by 60% just by having the lycopene in your system. And so this is actually how we can make some of these subtle and delicious, tasty choices that actually will help us as we navigate through our lives. And so it's no secret, I think, that, in the Mediterranean, many times you have a tomato salad at lunchtime before people go back out into the sun or to the beach.
If you just think about today, when rates of skin cancer have just gone up exponentially in recent decades, it's just like something that was rare, earlier on in the history of our species, documented history. And you think about what were people doing, because sunscreen is even a newer invention. What were people doing? How were people surviving such a vicious thing, interacting with the sun? Is through our diet, because a lot of that protection is from the inside out.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because sunscreen is just a thin layer on the top that you got to reapply, and once you get in the water or once you sweat it off, this type of protection, antioxidant protection, DNA protection from the inside out, takes advantage of your 40 trillion cells. It uses food to power it up even more, to be more vigorous on your behalf, and it protects you from the inside out. That's the way to go.
Yeah. Another one of these foods that you mentioned is kiwis.
Oh, yeah.
In this context.
All right. Look, kiwis you can find almost anywhere these days. They're a fruit from Southeast Asia. Fuzzy on the outside. By the way, most people don't think they can eat the skin of kiwi, but in fact, you can put the skin into a blender and you get a ton of the natural dietary fiber from the skin. It's really packed. But the flesh, which is either green or golden, is sort of mildly sweet. The golden kiwi is a little bit sweeter, but I like the green ones. Got these little dark seeds. Wonderful source of antioxidant activity in kiwi. It's got a ton of vitamin C. It's packed with dietary fiber, and 1 kiwi a day will actually protect your DNA again by about 60%. All right, and if you had to eat 3 kiwis for breakfast, for example, pretty easy to do. If you if you cut up the kiwi and put it in chunks, you could be eating that as a breakfast, as I have. Basically, that starts to build back damaged DNA. So 1 kind of is like a missile shield, prevents the damage from coming in by about 60%. That's just 1 kiwi a day, simple. But then you add 3, any DNA that did get damaged, it'll start to repair it. It sends out the road crew to fill up the potholes.
Amazing. Amazing. Now, in this context, when we're talking about the DNA protection system, you also get into this conversation about methylation in the book as well. Let's talk about that.
All right. So the interesting thing about DNA is that it's much more than a genetic code. A genetic code is kind of like software program. It's just like it's an algorithm, and it just kind of runs. Our DNA doesn't change, but what we can do is we can actually unlock and uncover certain parts of our DNA that we want to actually operate. On the other hand, we can also cover up some areas that we don't want to operate in our DNA. That's the way our DNA actually is really controlled after we're born. So people are like, well, you can't change my genetics. True. However, at least not yet. However, what we can do is we can actually cover up parts of your DNA that are maybe not doing the things that we want them to do, and we can uncloak them when there's parts that we want them to actually do their thing. So methylation is covering it up, and it is part of what we call epigenetics. So a lot of people are talking about epigenetics now. Let me just explain that. Let me just sort of get people to see epigenetics is as simple as saying that you're going to cover up certain parts of the crossword puzzle, or you're gonna remove the covering from certain parts of the crossword puzzle, so you can either see more or see less. That's basically epigenetics. And it turns out the foods we eat can actually help us do that. So there are lots of epigenetic changes, from all these health defense foods that we can actually eat, that what we want to do with body fat, like methylation, actually blocks the process to make extra body fat. So when we actually methylate, we're covering up some of those crossword puzzle things. All right. You don't know if it's going to be 6 letters going horizontally or 3 letters going down. You cover that up, and your fat has a harder time growing.
It's so fascinating. Again, it's all built in.
It's all built in.
This is another quote from the book in this section. Quote, a study by scientists at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology compared the DNA of 60 lean and 60 obese women who were between the age of 23 and 31 years old. They found there were 10 specific sites in the DNA that were more methylated, helpfully blocked, in people who were lean compared to those who were obese, unquote. Fascinating.
Absolutely. And so that shows you, this is kind of where we are with this research. It means that there are certain spots that are vulnerabilities that some people carry around that might predispose them to gain extra weight. And so if you block those vulnerable spots, think about finger in the dike, all right? Just block those, all right? Then you actually might be able to tip the balance more in favor of a more healthy body type, body composition.